Welcome back. Well, the 2022 Manufacturing Indaba started today following what's been 2 very difficult years from the pandemic. The sector says it's looking at rebuilding and as global and local economies start to turn the tide in their respective countries. The question for us, of course, is whether there will be growth in the sector. Well, we're joined now by Prashaen Reddy, a partner at the global management consultancy Kearney. Prashaen, good evening to you, and thank you very much indeed for your time. We all know how important manufacturing is, particularly because it can, under the right circumstances, create jobs. What's the outlook for our manufacturing sector over the next few years?
Certainly, Stefan. I think the manufacturing sector is coming through a period of recovery at the moment. We've seen, of course, in the last quarter, the growth rate increased to about 4.9% in terms of local manufacturing growth. And it continues to be a large contributor to South Africa's economy in terms of the GDP, about 13%. So we do anticipate the artificially depressed demand scenario we had with the pandemic to shift as we move into the future. We've seen this with global manufacturers already, many of them starting to grow even faster than the rates that were experienced in 2019.
We've seen all sorts of disruptions to supply chains around the world. There's a new thing called, I think it's called nearshoring, shoring rather. In other words, you want to make sure that you're actually able to get what is manufactured. If you have an order in for, I don't know, buttons for pens or something, you want to make sure that you're actually able to ship it to where you need it. Is that an opportunity for us, or is it not really going to pan out like that?
Absolutely. I think from a South African perspective, we import quite a number of goods and services from abroad. And certainly there is a great opportunity to localize more and more of that manufacturing. I think we've seen the resilience of supply chains not stand up during the pandemic, where we've had disruptions across the world. And there is an opportunity for us to localize many more commodities in the South African space. If we have to think about it, even about 10% of capacity of local imported manufactured goods had to be manufactured in South Africa, we're looking at thousands of jobs that could be created, actually tens of thousands of jobs that could be created, even if we had to localize 10% of that manufacturing capacity within the country. We also have a strong manufacturing base to draw from, even though it's been, of course, eroding over time. Certainly the capabilities in the automotive, petrochemicals, mining and machinery sectors, food and beverages, are certainly sectors where we can definitely start to focus on more.
The reason that the sector, as I understand it, our sector has been shrinking over time is because during the sort of rise of what I would call the last globalization era, during the rise of China, defined by the rise of China really, it was cheaper to buy things that were made in other countries and ship it here rather than make it here. Is that still the case? Are we just more expensive than producing something in China or Vietnam?
Certainly, I think it has to do with the challenges we face as a country, the access to cheaper electricity costs, which has been certainly a driver of manufacturing in the past in South Africa, competitive labor costs, which has also been a driver of manufacturing in South Africa, and reliability in some of the energy sectors has been big contributors to sort of the challenges we've faced as being a competitive manufacturing country. But I think moving forward, what we've seen across the world is that we've obviously need to resolve some of those challenges on the energy side. But once we're able to do that, I think there's opportunities in terms of new sectors that are growing, particularly in the energy space, where we could localize some of the manufacturing of our energy needs, be it in the renewable sector, or in the green chemicals or green energy sectors. And certainly we're starting to see greater focus on efficiencies and digitization, new technologies being introduced into manufacturing, which will allow us to compete as well on the global stages. Those investments are going to be critical to enable our manufacturing sector to be competitive on the global stage. However, I will say that when we think about the broader African picture and the supply chain within the African context, South Africa has certainly a more important role to play moving forward from a manufacturing opportunity point of view to supply into its region. And of course, that can be far more competitive if done appropriately compared to importing from the east or the west into the continent where most of our manufactured goods are coming from.
For that all to happen, and I try, Prashaen, to be as optimistic as I can, but quite a few things would need to sort of line up. So you would need the right industrial policy from government. I'm trying very hard not to think of Minister Ibrahim Patel as I say that. We would need to have investors feeling confident about all sorts of things, about safety and security, about policy stability as we go to what could be a very tricky election or possibly a very important election in 2024. There would need to be absolutely sure that the correct energy policy was in place so that they would know in 2 years' time there would be a proper, reliable source of electricity. Prashaen, are you optimistic that all of those things are going to line up? I mean, there are plenty of other factors I could mention as well.
Sure. I mean, it's a challenging road ahead in terms of all of those policies lining up and certainly creating an enabling environment. I don't think that the sector or government or the people of the country or manufacturers themselves would not want us to proceed on that path. Certainly, which is why Carney has launched also the Factory of the Year competition once again within the South African context to ensure that we can help benchmark and show the way forward in terms of improvement opportunities for manufacturers in the South African landscape, and to guide also developers in the policy space to ensure that they enable manufacturers in the right way. It is obviously a challenging road ahead, and that's not just within the South African context. I think that's across the world, given where we are with energy prices, disruptions in supply chain, and of course, many of the other crises we face across the world. But I don't think that that should stop us from thinking about the potential we do have. And we must always remember that from South Africa and an African context, we are growing from a far lower base than our global counterparts. So there's a lot of demand within the continent. Otherwise, our counterparts in Asia and the West would not be looking at Africa as an opportunity to export. So therefore, I do think that there's tremendous opportunity. The economics of it will work out. The supply and demand is there. It does come down to effective policy, which we need to obviously continue to enable.
Prashaen Reddy, thank you. A partner at Kearney. I really do appreciate the time.